I really love the ideas they wanted to tackle in this season of Louder and Prouder, but the execution of them has been a mixed bag. The Proud Family is a show that isn't afraid to get into certain topics that focuses on progressive talking points and topics that many shows wouldn't dream of touching. The Proud Family has been doing this for a very long time, even in its initial run. Only this go-round, with the internet being as prominent as ever, the critics have been more vocalized for leaning a certain way for the more conservative mindset. While those criticisms I deemed unfair, I do think there are a few things to criticize on how they tackled some of the issues at hand, but not in the way you think. So let's look at some of the major talking points the show was willing to dive into and see what worked for each of them and what didn't work.
As we celebrate Juneteenth for the umpteenth time, our account is still outstanding. Cause this country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country.
So the first thing I want to bring up is that this moment on its own is incredibly powerful and meaningful to the topic of slaves playing a huge role in American history. You see pieces like this in a lot of theatrical segments of poetry and improv events. They used a lot of visuals and poetic tools you would commonly see in these pieces, more specifically, consonants and repetition. If you write down the entire monologue Penny and her crew came up with for their performance, you would see a ton of those two poetry techniques. The most obvious one is quite clearly the repetition throughout the monologue, further pushing the idea of what the topic is about. Repetition is simply a poem repeating a word or phrase throughout the entirety of it, which for this piece in particular is slaves built this country, 40 acres and a mule, and freedom. Each of these phrases of repetition are used in different ways to really bring the point home. Slaves built this country reinforces the fact that slavery played a huge part in building the economy and culture of America. 40 acres and a mule is used as a reaction to an offer that is more of a band-aid to a major issue, the issue of lowballing black people in the country, while creating this facade of American freedom when a majority of African Americans are shackled by the prejudiced laws against them, and the horrific perception of your average black person. For freedom, it discusses the three different instances. The first freedom, fighting for America's freedom, refers to blacks playing a role in filling the armies of the colonies to fight for independence against the British regime at the time. The second, emancipation is not freedom, talks about the facade that the Emancipation Proclamation is when it comes to freedom, because the abolishment of slavery affected some states, and those who were freed were still segregated and scrutinized by other laws to continue to suppress them. For the final one, We're Taking Our Freedom, expresses the desire of black people to acquire true equality, because while we have taken steps forward to that, we still have a long way to go to truly feel free. The consonants within this piece can only be noticed when you're paying attention to how it flows overall from the sounds of the consonants you hear. That's the definition for it, and they use it a lot. Take this stanza for example. And we, the descendants of slaves in America, have earned reparations for their suffering and continue to earn reparations every moment we spend submerged in a systemic prejudice, racism, and white supremacy that America was founded with and still has not atoned for. The sound these consonants make within this stanza is giving a hissing sound, which can equate to a snake. That is symbolic for something that is not to be trusted, as they slither around and wrap around you. It looks harmless at first, until it starts to clench around you tighter and tighter until it suffocates you, which is what this piece is portraying, that this system is that snake that continues to suffocate the lives out of black people within the country. There are other consonances within this piece as well, and it really shows the impact it could have on an individual. Even those who detract on the ideas of being honest about the history of how this country came to be. So I'm curious if you guys can find more of the consonances in this piece. If you spot any, let me know in the comments below. Now, my only critique for this episode, which is more of a nitpick than anything else, is that the piece isn't necessarily fitting to the episode in its entirety. Mainly because of the fact that this is a debating competition, and correct me if I'm wrong, that probably isn't going to fly in normal circumstances. Especially since the main point of this episode is Penny's jealousy of Dejanay spending more time with her new boyfriend that was only using her to get her notes. But suspension of disbelief is a thing, and I love this scene, so I'm suspending it hard flipping core. This is peak Proud Family when they talk about these issues. It is something that they've done then, and so it comes to no surprise that they would be doing things like this now.
There is nothing wrong with you or any of us. He just likes Zoe.
Because she's white. Right, Maya? My cousin lives down the street from him and says he only goes out with the vanilla.
Now, I want to emphasize that this is a great talking point to discuss in general, as I do believe this is a genuine issue of dating based on skin color, or the topic of being open about one's preferences of skin color. Now, this is considered a gray area because preferences do exist in general for sexual interests, but the problem is how much you emphasize it. Like only dating someone with a certain age group, or only looking for some with a certain type of hair. Going out of your way to limit your options based on certain visual requirements reinforces that a person has to abide by certain beauty standards to have a chance to get with anyone. Not to mention you're limiting yourself to a small group of people, which more likely puts you in a spot of being alone. Add race to the mix, and you're really playing with fire, because the notion of being only interested in one race can mean that either you hypersexualize the race, or may have racist beliefs. Neither is a good thing to be associated with. This episode tackles the issue when a popular actor joins the school and wants to go to an event with a Pacific girl, which in this case was Zoe. So initially the crew was happy for her, until Maya announces the dude only dates white girls. So what does the crew decide to do about the situation? A. Confront the guy and confirm his interests. B. Ask Maya for her source, which by the way was something she heard from her cousin. C. Feel some type of way about the dude in question. Or D. Feel some type of way about Zoe being the one. If you chose A, B, or C, you're definitely better than the crew. For some reason, they have a strong animosity towards Zoe for not seeing the issue of the guy being only interested in white girls, even though she was never told that rumor in the first place, and they never confirmed that to be the truth. They just took it to heart and decided to ostracize Zoe for very little reason. It's frustrating because they used the boy as a plot device to separate the girls and never gave us the opportunity to see him act a certain way towards the other girls or react to the thought of being with a woman of color. They just took what they were told at face value and decided to shut out Zoe for being the first white girl he saw. It'd be different if we saw the animosity and Zoe ignored the signs. Then I agree for it being warranted because she is blinded by the fact she was the one chosen by this celebrity. Since none of that happens, she just gets treated like crap for being the tokenized white girl without her realizing it. This is a prime example of the Proud Family taking what could be a great episode on paper, but misses the mark in portraying the story that was given to talk about a certain issue that is very prominent in society. They made Zoe the outsider for very little reason, and none of the girls outside of Penny looks good in that result, which further pushes the notion that Penny's crew is fake as hell. The major moments come out as more frustrating because of the lack of acknowledgement to the actual problem in the room, which makes it a prime example of being good on paper, but the execution was not put together as well.
Bibi, however,
What? What's wrong with my baby?
I believe Bibi is showing signs of what we call autism.
Now, of course, before diving deep into this topic, I have very little knowledge or experience when it comes to autism. So I really want to emphasize if I get anything wrong or I misinterpret something, please let me know in the comments, because I want to make sure I don't step on any boundaries with this topic, and would like to gain more knowledge than what I have. Though I do believe this episode is definitely another great topic to speak on, as well as a near flawless execution. The amount of struggle the Prouds have had when it comes to watching over BB definitely shows the amount of attention those on the spectrum need at an early age. It is something that you can't just throw onto someone if they haven't had any experience in taking care of a child that is diagnosed with autism. BB being able to slip out of sight and be in peculiar situations really shows that his curiosities and urges are much stronger compared to others, which in turn could put him in a dangerous spot without him realizing it. Another huge plus is how they were able to handle the doctor breaking the news to the Prouds about BB. It's news that is incredibly difficult to take for any parent, and showing Oscar's animosity towards the thought of his son being on the spectrum is completely natural. The reason is because of that negative notion autism has garnered in the public eye, usually associating it with a lower IQ, or even worse, a disease. Not to mention that depending on the person in question, the amount of finances to have the best resources available to the child can increase, something parents like Oscar see as a slick way for doctors to hit them in their pockets even more. I also want to applaud for them for sharing that struggle of a sibling for someone that is on the spectrum too. Penny gets thrown into taking care of the younger siblings a lot, and it can be tough to handle for her at times. That especially can be the case when she was panicking in finding her little brother. Frustration can overcome a sibling, no matter how much they understand the situation. Not just because it can be a lot to handle if you're doing it by yourself, but also because of the fact that they do acquire more attention by the parents, which could lead to jealousy. Still, the family understood that they all have to do their part for BB and show that love and support he deserves, just like any kid growing up. There's a lot of layers to this topic, and they tackled each one with a lot of grace, and it helps people understand that being on the spectrum is not as much of a hindrance to the individual that's diagnosed. I do think the superpower bit at the end was a bit unnecessary, but again, very minor nitpick, and is still one of the most powerful episodes of the show.
Hey guys, this is Penny Proud coming to you live from Smithfield City Jail. Let everybody know that this is what happens when you reveal the truth.
Alright, so I'll just be honest. This finale is basically the biggest example of what I consider this season to be. The topic at hand is definitely an important one, with the discussion about protests, looking at the full history of prominent figures, scars and all, and the struggles of changing legislation. It's too bad they completely rushed the shit out of it. The finale had a lot of promise on paper, especially with how it started with the entire cast protesting at a jail. It brings you to a lot of questions about what happened to get them all there. Then we cut back to how this all started, and I'll be honest, the pacing was all over the place. I feel the plot device of Emily was alright as the aid to Maya discovering the truth about Smith being a slave owner. Outside of that, the instigation was not handled the best throughout this episode. There were certainly some interesting points to be had within them, but it felt pretty forced when they tried to toss certain terminologies in the conversation when they have this discourse. The biggest example of that is when Barry was confronted by Maya about the diary showing dark parts of his family's past. When he opted not to take this seriously, they kind of dumped the white fragility term on him. Things like that do kind of take away from scenes like this because it feels like they are trying to explain the definition to the audience instead of making it feel natural. Then when we get to the ceremony is where the episode really became a mess. While it was an intense moment, it definitely felt a lot more clunky than it needed to, and it just came out of nowhere. Then we get into my biggest issue even more so, which is the time skips. This felt that they were not able to get the full story they wanted, so they just throw these time skips to save time, and the issue just gets resolved? Well, yes, for a family-friendly show, Going through the legislation process may not be the most interesting, but it just feels lazy the way they wrap up the story if we don't have something that involves the government officials discussing the issue. It felt like this should have been a two-parter so that the overall story can flow a lot better comparatively. This topic cannot fit in a 23-minute window, and it's a shame because this is a huge topic to dive into. It's deserving of a TV special if they wanted to tackle something like this, because of the amount of time it has now cripples the overall message it wants to tell, and it doesn't feel rewarding at the end. The Proud Family has great topics that really makes you want to think when done correctly. But sometimes it can be too big to handle in what a regular episode can allow. There is still a lot to enjoy about the show, as it has wonderful and fun moments for all to enjoy. And I definitely feel it does a great job in helping us see certain aspects of Black culture, even with taking on topics that may be tricky to portray at times. Even with its flaws, it's a great show to continue the discussion of what we see in Black culture and the important history that never gets talked about in schools. Also, it's always enjoyable to see conservatives squirm from a dab of truth.